and point of view. You know, many Christians leave the church after they graduate, but they don't have to graduate from God. That's why we have the Mind Games Camp this year, June 16 to 22nd, a week of presentations, role play, as well as fun at camp. Sign up today at probe.org and help them meet these challenges to their faith.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day.
And indeed, welcome to this Thursday edition of Today's Issues. We're calling it the News Coup today because the regular crew is not here, and so the newsroom has been asked to fill in. Fred Jackson here, along with Chris Woodward. Morning, Chris.
Good morning.
And, of course, Steve Jordahl will be joining us in just a little bit. A busy news day while the crew is away. They're at a retreat over in Alabama and suffering through terrible weather, I'm sure, you know, and golf and all that good stuff.
I had a paper jam in the copier this morning.
We've just gone through a power outage here in our home base here in Tupelo, and but I think we're out of that for now, and everything was down, so people were wandering around munching on popcorn and Diet Cokes.
Yeah.
So
if anybody was curious, our popcorn machine is still going, even during a power outage.
Yes. So glad to be here and glad to be with you today. It is another busy news day. Chris, what's leading us off?
Yes, something to watch, and we'll certainly be covering this throughout the day on AFN, both radio and print. President Joe Biden is set to speak by phone today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This would be the first time they've spoke that we know of, at least, since Israel launched that attack in which people upset with Israel say Israel killed 7 World Central Kitchen Aid workers. The White House has described Biden as, quote, outraged and heartbroken by that attack. But the president is probably, he needs to smooth some relations over with Netanyahu, based on the fact that the U.S. Abstained from that recent vote on whether there should be a formal ceasefire there, and Netanyahu was not happy about that. So it's probably going to be a very interesting conversation between these two leaders.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Of course, a few days ago, we had the bombing, and most people believe it was by Israel, on that Iranian facility in Damascus. And that bombing took out 2 of their Iranian major kind of arms people. These are people who supply arms for Iran to terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. And so Iran has threatened retaliation for that. It's been really interesting to watch the White House reaction to that. John Kirby, one of his national security spokesmen for President Biden, saying, we didn't know anything about it. We weren't involved with that, and it's almost signaling to Iran, don't blame us, don't hurt us for what happened there in Damascus earlier this week. Of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu is just getting over some surgery from a couple of days ago, and now he is facing the extra pressure of demonstrations earlier this week in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and outside of his residence there in Jerusalem. And the protests are allegedly about calling for Netanyahu to go along with a ceasefire, so hopefully bringing home more of the 100 hostages still being held by the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. But Netanyahu has remained very firm. He has not changed his mind about the goal of this exercise in Gaza, and that is to end the reign of Hamas terrorism in Gaza. He says it must never, never be allowed to take control in that area again. And he is resolute on that front. And so, Chris, you're exactly right. The conversation today between Biden and Netanyahu is going to be very interesting. Now, how much we hear about what went on in that conversation, of course, on this side of the water, it's going to be filtered through the White House. John Kirby and, KJB, Karine Jean-Pierre. So we'll find out maybe a little bit about it a little bit later on. But I tell you what, Biden is under a lot of pressure domestically here. For the most part, the Democratic Party has had the support of the liberal Jewish community in this country. but the Jewish community in this country, for the most part, is still saying, United States, Biden administration, you need to stand by Israel, and in their effort to get rid of the Hamas terrorists. The flip side of all of that is, of course, is that you have a large contingent of American Palestinians, like in Michigan, at least 100,000, 200,000 in Michigan, Rashida Tlaib amongst them, who say, no, the United States needs to back away from Israel, supporting them. They're calling it a massacre in Gaza, et cetera, et cetera. So, and just the other night, the White House was ready to sponsor a kind of a Ramadan wind-down dinner, an iftar dinner, they call it. They've been doing that for the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. A number of Muslim leaders in this country were invited, and they boycotted the meeting.
Yeah.
And the only Islamic people that showed up were people who work for the Biden administration. So there's a lot of political tension in this country, a lot of pressure on the Biden administration from both sides in all of this, and certainly from the evangelical community, for the most part, that supports Israel, right, supports Israel's right to defend itself, and has supported Netanyahu in his war against the Hamas terrorists. But, Chris, we have a special guest a little bit later on, Jan Markell, one of the favorite programs on American Family Radio, Understanding the Times. The host of that program, Jan Markell, who is unapologetic in her support for Israel. She'll be joining us at the bottom of the clock, and she'll have more to say on this. So a busy day on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And while Joe Biden is battling situations involving Israel, he's still getting hammered over things like the economy and immigration. I say that because we have a story airing today. Rusty just aired one installment of it at the top of the hour here just a moment ago. But according to a Wall Street Journal poll, Donald Trump is leading President Joe Biden in 6 of 7 swing states. And we're talking about states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. Wisconsin was an outlier, but I'll get to that in just a moment. Bottom line, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden anywhere from 2 to 8 points in these 6 of 7 swing states here. And that doesn't bode well for an incumbent president who not that long ago urged people in a video to, quote, help me finish the job. I've got some reaction here that we can bring in from a couple of people. Let's begin with this one. It's going to be columnist Robert Knight, someone we feature a lot on AFN.net, talking with us about the Wall Street Journal poll, which, again, shows Trump leading Biden in 6 of 7 swing states. Clip 6.
At this moment, under this president, the mix of black, Latino.
Pump, you can't help but think this can't go on much longer if our country's to survive. And I think most Americans are disgusted with what's happened over the last 3 years. The prices really have doubled, let's face it. They say inflation's only 18% or something, but everybody knows it's far greater than that for many, many things. The open border is become a huge issue. Biden is losing the Democratic base, and this hasn't happened in a long time, and it really is foreboding for Democrats. But a lot of Americans are worried that the Democrats seem to not care.
That's really interesting. And when Bob Knight talks about the Democratic base, he's talking about the black vote, which recent polling has shown has really diminished in their support for the Democrats and the Biden administration. And a lot of that has to do with the economy, because whether skin color is no barrier to economic pressures. Right. And also amongst the Hispanic vote, a lot of folks don't realize that the Hispanic vote is huge, percentage-wise, 21% of the American population. Many of those Hispanics, they're hardworking, they are pro-family, they are not all in on abortion because many of them are Roman Catholics, very strong pro-life, but also they are not in favor of what's happening at the border. a lot of people may think, well, it's mostly Latino people that are coming across the southern border. That is not the case. And so they resent those who have come here to this country legally, have lived here, have built their families here, have built businesses here. I'm talking amongst the Hispanic community. They resent what's going on right now. They're upset about that. And then, of course, you have what may be surprising is that there is a shifting amongst even young people who have tended to vote a Democrat. But more and more we're seeing in the polls where the young people are moving away from the Democratic Party. Some of them are going to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They find him appealing.
Right.
Kennedy's fairly liberal on abortion. But, in other areas, and I think honestly, when we get to talking about that, more and more young people are becoming more sensitive to our economic woes. It's affecting them. And I'm talking, young marrieds in their 20s, that sort of thing.
Right.
Those are people who really feel the impact of this. So it's really interesting. There's another story that's out today that the Biden administration, they're hiring a bunch of new pollsters. Now, you may think, okay, wait a minute, what does that matter? Well, the pollsters are more there to are more political activists. The Biden campaign is using them as activists to go into these communities, the Black community, Hispanic community, to try to spin up more support for Biden. So that's part of the dynamic that's going on right now. But this Wall Street Journal poll from earlier this week, 6 of the 7 swing states moving towards Donald Trump. That is bad news. I was watching an interview on Fox the other day, and it was really interesting. They had a Democrat on there, as they do these panels, Republican and Democrat representative. But the Democrat representative did not argue the point at all that that Biden is in trouble on the border. He's in trouble with the economy, and in particular on the border crisis. This Democrat said Biden has got to do something more. They're repeating this line right now, this Democrat talking point, that it's the Republicans' fault as to what's going on at the border because Republicans stood against this so-called bipartisan deal. No.
As if they've been in power this entire 50 years that Joe Biden has been in some sort of public office.
Yeah, everybody understands. Joe Biden removed the protections that Donald Trump had put in place when he was president. One of the first things that Joe Biden did was remove all of those by executive order. First day in office, he removed all of those, and that's when the invasion began. Joe Biden, when he was running for president, what did he say? I'll invite a surge at the border. Need to keep reminding people of that. So he is reaping what I'm talking about Biden. He is reaping what he has sown.
Now, again, these 6 of the 7 states here, Trump is leading Biden in these swing states. I mentioned Wisconsin was one outlier, but it's like a bare lead. He's barely beating Trump there in Wisconsin, and that's only when there's like a multiple candidate race. Wall Street Journal actually narrowed it down and asked voters, okay, what if it's just Trump and Biden? And in that situation, it's tied. So you might as well say Trump's doing very, very well in all the swing states that he's going to need to help beat Joe Biden and get back in the White House. We talked to Gary Bauer about this yesterday as well, and there has been a lot of criticism of Trump saying, well, he's going to lose the suburban woman vote. And Gary did say, yeah, he's probably going to lose some suburban women, but he's gaining people in other demographics here. Therefore, Gary is not concerned at all, and he actually thinks Trump is the he's said as much for a number of months now that Trump is the one out of all the candidates that ran this year that can actually beat Biden. And don't take my word for it. Let's do clip 4.
I have believed all along that the only possible Republican nominee this year that could win was in fact Donald Trump. And the reason I say that is that Donald Trump does lose some suburban women, but he also brings countless working-class Americans of all races to his banner. And I've not seen any evidence that any other Republican that competed against him can do the same thing. So when people say, if we could only get rid of Trump, then we'd be able to win, I think it's the exact opposite.
Okay. Now, some people might hear this and go, well, these are a couple of boomers talking about Trump. Of course they would say this. They're more in line with Trump than they are with Joe Biden. But even young people, and I have one example here. It's Kaylee McGee-White. She works for a number of publications, including DC Examiner. She was on Fox and Friends First today. This audio is going to begin with Fox and Friends First personality Carly Shimkus asking Kaylee McGee-White about Biden's polling problems, and you'll hear it from there. Let's do clip 5.
At this moment, under this president, the mix of Black, Latino, and young voters who have been crucial to electing Democrat candidates are withholding support from Biden or shifting towards Donald Trump, a trend particularly dramatic among men. By contrast, it is hard to find a group where Biden is improving on his standing from the 2020 election. I am sure many people, including the Biden campaign, would love to know why this is happening and how seriously we should be taking these numbers 7 months out. So what do you think about this?
Right. And what these numbers really do confirm is that there is no Biden comeback. He's not bouncing back in the polls. He just continues to drag further and further behind Trump, in large part because of those key demographics you just mentioned. I'm particularly interested in watching what's happening with the young adults vote, people my age. And it's remarkable to see this massive shift where you see so many young people fleeing the Democratic Party in droves. And keep in mind, this is a demographic that turned out overwhelmingly for Biden back in 2020.
I just thinking this is a presidential election year like none other.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the last one. Yeah.
You have the Republican Donald Trump facing 91 total felony charges in 4 different jurisdictions. So he is, when he's not in court, he's out campaigning. When he's not campaigning, he's in court. And so you've got all of that going on, which I think it is a fair assessment to say, in some strange, bizarre way, the more the judicial system goes after Donald Trump, his numbers improve. Mm-hmm. There is, and you can say that's sympathy, that's anger, that's a realization that we have a justice system that seems to be out to get one political candidate. And now you also have the dynamic of Biden's border crisis. You talk about the swing states. Trump goes to Michigan and to Wisconsin the other day. Mm-hmm. And what does he talk about? He talks about the border in Michigan, way up there in the north.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because the border crisis has moved north. Mm-hmm. People, when he was stood in a podium in Michigan the other day, he had these sheriffs, he had these police chiefs in full uniform behind him, mm-hmm. clapping as he talked about what's going on the southern border and blaming, rightly so, Joe Biden for what's going on down there. In fact, Trump, he coined the phrase Biden's border bloodbath or something along that nature. Mm-hmm. And you're going to hear that over and over and over again. So the border crisis is not just affecting Texas and Florida, it's now affecting the whole nation. You now have Democrats in New York, in Chicago, who are upset because of these migrants that are, they're called migrants, illegal immigrants that are being arriving in New York in huge numbers by the thousands, Chicago. And now we have this story out of Chicago. So Democrats are concerned about that. But now you have Democrat mom and dads. Mm. You have the news this morning that there's been an uptick in tuberculosis and measles being diagnosed amongst a lot of these young people who are going to public schools. They weren't checked for these diseases when they came into this country. And now they're spreading amongst other students in public schools, especially the stories out of Chicago this morning. So this just continues to build against Biden.
Yeah, to your point about the concerns of migrants possibly having tuberculosis, maybe measles, I've got some audio here of Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez talking to Fox and Friends about how illegal immigration has also become a public health concern. Clip 10.
Without question, we have seen where efforts by this administration to put migrants on a toxic dump site were labeled as racist when people like myself and community opposed it, saying it wasn't healthy for them or for the neighborhood to have all of that dust kicked up. Even when I brought this issue about tuberculosis, measles, and mumps to the forefront, I've been told that I'm anti-immigrant and xenophobic, even though I'm the great-grandson of immigrants. So they could gaslight all they want, but at a certain point, the truth is going to come out, and we're seeing it come out slowly and steadily now, as we saw with the measles and as we're seeing now with tuberculosis.
Well, again, I'm going to use the phrase, Biden is reaping what he has sown.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the problem. Even though the mainstream media is still on his side, most of the stories coming out of the mainstream media for Biden is still White House press releases. That's what the stories read like. Mm-hmm. But the American people have gotten on to this. I think the American people overall understand that the future of this country is at stake, and they're very concerned. Given what Biden has given them over the last 3.5 years, they're very concerned with what another term. And we haven't even talked about Biden's mental state.
No.
We haven't even done a story on that lately. Yeah. And I hear it very rarely anymore because there's just so many other things that are coming up that make the Biden administration look pretty bad.
Yeah, as someone that's worked in broadcasting for 22 years and others here have been longer in the business than I have, I can tell you there's only so much time in a day, and you only have so much time in a newscast, and you have to pick and choose what we're going to be able to cover today. To your point about the media trying to spin things for Joe Biden and in his favor, the Associated Press has long been an ally of the Democratic Party, and they love some Joe Biden. One example of that was just this week. This is the beginning of the story, talking about Trump's Biden border bloodbath comment. The Associated Press, which is a news outlet everybody and their brother runs somehow, some way on broadcast and in print. This is the beginning of their story. Donald Trump has again used language denounced by Democrats to hammer President Joe Biden. I wonder where you are on this issue, Associated Press.
Oh, I know. It's just ridiculous when you read, and I mean, we have a contract for the Associated Press. They are the world's biggest provider of news. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we have the right to edit their content, and we do our best to edit out their liberal leanings. But I'm just amazed as a person that's been in the journalism business for many decades now. I would feel guilty if I worked for the Associated Press and I was being told, this is the way you have to write this story. You have to put a positive spin in favor of the Democrats, and you have to do everything possible to demean, to denounce anything that Donald Trump says. That's where the journalism is in this country right now.
Yeah, it's a wing of the Democratic Party. They are an extension of the White House press briefing room, and just to give you an idea of how far-reaching and how much they reach people, because everybody, particularly small television stations and newspapers that just what we call rip and read. They literally say or print whatever the Associated Press says. That's why a lot of people go, oh, okay, well, it must be that way, because that's thus saith the AP, as if it's the Gospel of John or something like that.
Well, you saw what happened at NBC the other day when they hired Ronna McDaniel, former chair of the RNC, the Republican National Committee. There was an open revolt on the air.
Chuck Todd, they owe you an apology.
For hiring this former RNC. Like the major networks, they don't have any trouble hiring former Democrats. Look at ABC, George Stephanopoulos and others, Jen Psaki at NBC, former Democrat Biden White House spokesperson. They have no problems with that, but they hire Ronna McDaniel to give another side of this political story. And as I say, there was an open rebellion, so much so, I think they were going to pay her $300,000, so much so that they fired her within days.
Yeah.
It's amazing what goes on. Folks, there's a reason why you have American Family Radio News. Brother Don many years ago said, you know what? He saw what was coming down the track in the level of bias in the mainstream media, and that is why American Family Radio was created, and God has blessed it greatly. All right, you're listening to this Thursday edition of Today's Issues. Fred here with Chris. Steve Jordahl will join us in a little bit. And after the break, we will hear from Jan Markell of Understanding the Times, her take of what's going on in the Middle East, but also what's going on within evangelical Christianity with regards to hesitancy about talking about prophecy.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
It was all caused by a common house cat, investigators said. It's kind of hard to believe, but they've pieced together the events, and this evidently is what's happened. Now listen to this. The house cat knocked a vase off of a shelf in the utility room. The vase fell onto a valve on a gas line. The impact opened the gas valve, letting the room fill with gas. Gas from the leak soon reached the water heater pilot light and ignited. The result? An explosion which moved 2 walls in a house, broke windows, and started a small fire. The damage will come to about $3,000, said the news account. But luckily for Air Force Major James Miller and his family at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, no one was hurt. One never knows how far one little deed will affect his life. Things which we count so small, so insignificant, so petty, end up dominating us. They all begin innocently enough. They're such little deeds that we hardly take them seriously. After all, what harm can such little deeds do? Most of our major accomplishments in life start off as little things. Then they begin to grow, take on size and importance. A person on the moon didn't start out as a big project. It started out as a little thought in the minds of people. And if you had spoken of it seriously, you most certainly would have been the talk of the town, and they would have been laughing at you. The airline industry, for instance, didn't start out the monstrosity that it is now. It started out as a thought in the minds of a few people centuries ago. And others considered those who had such thoughts a little touched in the head. On the other hand, most of our catastrophes didn't begin as such either. Hitler had no dreams of murdering 6 million Jews as an 11-year-old. The idea started slowly, but it grew too fast. Nero didn't set out to be a ruler mad with insanity and jealousy, but that's the way he ended up, fiddling as Rome burned. We don't take the little petty things too seriously. After all, they are so small, what can they hurt? Who'll miss the quarter from the cash register? Surely not the company, as large as it is. And soon it's $1 the company won't miss, and soon it's $5, which the company owes me. And it ends up in what the law calls embezzlement. We fully intended to pay it back. One social drink doesn't do any harm. It only loosens us up so we can enjoy the party. And the second helps a little more. And then another. And before long, all we want to do is to be the life of the party, even when there isn't a party. No person anywhere leaves that which he knows is the highest and best with one great leaping jump. Every person who betrays his Creator and himself and others does so with little things, slowly, little by little. Our lives are shaped basically by the sum total of the little things. While it may be the big things which impress us, it is the little things which influence us.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will. Ephesians 1:11.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And indeed, welcome back to today's issues. Fred Jackson here, along with Chris Woodward. We're sitting in today for Tim Wildman and Ed Vitagliano as they are away at an AFA retreat today, enjoying, I'm sure, a good time with many of our supporters. But good to be with you today, and so much going on. You know, we were talking earlier about supposedly that President Biden is going to have a conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. And boy, I wish I could listen in on that, but we can't. But perhaps someone who can speculate a little bit about the tenor of that conversation is our good friend Jan Markell from Understanding the Times, one of our favorite programs here at American Family Radio. Heard on Saturday at 1 p.m. Central, and then again on Sunday at noon Central here on American Family Radio. Jan, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Glad to be here.
Good to have you with us. Well, I have to do the obligatory thing. I have to check on you as to how the weather is going. You know, has spring arrived?
Oh, Fred, it's been the most bizarre winter, warm all winter, and then 2 weeks ago, everything got bitter cold, and my little pond froze, which it hadn't, and my ducks were so confused, and now finally we have spring, but it took a long time.
It took a long time to get there, but you have, for Minneapolis, you've had a fairly warm winter.
Yes, it's been great. We had a terribly bitter cold in the last 2 weeks, and as I said, things froze all of a sudden again. So I think nature is confused. I mean, my wildlife are confused.
Yeah, your ducks survived, did they?
They survived. Yes.
We're glad.
They're amazing.
They're amazing. Hey, listen, I was just mentioning about this phone call today between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'm afraid from what we've seen, we're now about 6 months since the Hamas massacre of more than 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children. And, the initial support for Israel was strong, but we have seen that deteriorate, especially in the last couple of months, Jan.
In a shocking way. And I think it goes even beyond that, Fred, because not only did the support deteriorate, but the loyalty seemed to switch to the barbarians of the world, Hamas and Islamic Jihad and those that perpetrated the atrocity. They suddenly were getting support as day by day Israel would lose support. And that was based on images coming out of Gaza. And war is a terrible, terrible ordeal, to be sure. But if people had seen, and if I could be, I won't be graphic, but if people could have seen the images coming out of the kibbutzim in the south of Israel, they would have understood why there had to be bloodshed going into Gaza to get rid of these barbarians.
Jen, I don't sense that even though Netanyahu, he's facing now protests in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, outside his residence in Jerusalem, I don't see him moving away from his resolve to finally end the Hamas rule in Gaza. Are you seeing anything differently there?
I don't see that happening, and that's one of the reasons why Benjamin Netanyahu is the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history, spanning a couple of decades, interrupted here and there, but they keep reelecting him because they know he's a fighter. He's not going to let the country be steamrolled, including by Mr. Biden, who wants to punish them for trying to defend themselves. The tension is getting to be unbearable, and Biden has been just clenching his teeth and grinding them here for 6 months and trying to pretend he's a friend of Israel when he really isn't. But poor Netanyahu, he's got a terrible situation on his hands, trying to protect his people, and the nations of the world don't want him to.
Hey, it's Chris here. I've got a question for you. Besides AFN.net, of course, where are some news outlets that you turn to for accurate information on the war between Israel and Hamas? Because, I don't want to sound like a cynical person, but I don't believe everything I see out of an American news outlet's coverage.
You've got to keep in mind that the Israeli media is every bit as leftist as the American media. And so, is there a very accurate source of news? For instance, Times of Israel, it's going to lean left. Jerusalem Post will lean left. Haaretz will be hard left. It's just really, really hard. There's some Christian places that people can consult. Certainly Joel Rosenberg's outfit, his online newspaper is All Israel News. All Israel News. and Joel is the editor and the publisher. I think that is the most accurate, certainly the most biblical. And I think they just do it's a daily online, and I think you can go read it. Mm-hmm. If you sign up for it, you get it in your inbox once and sometimes twice a day. And I think you can go to probably allisraelnews.com. I haven't done that because I get it in my inbox. That would be what I would recommend, Chris.
Yeah. One more thing on developments in the last week in the Middle East. We had the bombing of the Iranian consulate there in Damascus. Yeah. Damascus, Syria are biblical names. And I had somebody ask me the other day the prophetical significance of the war now moving into Damascus. And the Iranians are saying, hey, Israel, just wait. We are going to retaliate. Your read on that?
Well, first, there's the obliteration of Damascus is found in Isaiah 17, and that's a last days implication there. Isaiah 17, supposedly it's going to be kind of leveled, and the ones I'm sure who would do it would probably be in a situation like we're looking at now, would be Israel. I can't imagine who else would, although I guess Russia could suddenly turn on Syria and possibly level Damascus. I can't believe she'd do that, but she's leveled other cities in Syria. As for Iran, we know that that's Persia in the Bible, and we know that Persia plays a huge role in the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And so when we hear, Fred, that Israel took out some personnel in Syria that were part of Iran, and now Iran's going to retaliate. And then if Iran retaliates, Israel is going to have to probably strike Iran somewhere, maybe not just for proxies, but actually strike into Iran. But we know Iran is not going away, and we know that because she's got to be there for Gog and Magog, which is future. So there could be this kind of going back and forth here with some skirmishes, but I don't think anybody's going to drop an atomic bomb on anybody at this point in time. I really don't.
Your program, Understanding the Times here in American Family Radio, you deal with prophecy and you look at the day's news through the lens of Scripture and what all of this means. You wrote an article recently and you titled it Under Siege. And I was taken by that, and I had some speculation when I read the title, but then I read the article, and you're talking not so much about under siege from the unsaved world. You're talking about the teachers of Bible prophecy seem to be under siege in this country.
Right. Absolutely, as is the theology behind it, and that's for a dozen reasons that require a whole nother program. But I mean, in a sentence or two, the pulpits are pretty silent on this topic. I think not all, of course. I mean, there are certainly some very prophecy-friendly churches and pulpits. They are a vast minority, but we're thankful for them. I think because pastors probably see it, the whole topic of, let's just call it end times, Fred, perhaps as a bit doom and gloom, which if we believe King is coming for us, that's not really doom and gloom, but it's perceived as that. Mm-hmm. I think they feel, it won't fill the pews, it won't be seeker sensitive, it might not be, it just won't fill the pews or the offering plates, and so they're a little bit skitterish. And then I think a very justified reason for their skepticism is that some people have given the topic a horrible name. Remember Harold Camping some 10, 12, 13 years ago, and he was date setting, and my goodness, people were following him diligently and losing everything they had because of his nuttiness, and who wants to be identified with people like that? So they run from that, and rightfully so, but not to run from the whole topic, and that's what's been happening in the church for probably 30 years now.
I was listening to Dr. David Jeremiah the other day, his program, Turning Point, and in his message, his series of messages he's doing right now, he brought up the fact that he often hears from people, Jan, from churches who have never heard from their pulpit a series on the book of Revelation. They said
Right.
they've been attending churches for years, and their pastor has never touched the book of Revelation. But, the book of Revelation, yes, it deals with God's wrath, but it also tells the end of the story. Christians, Jesus is returning, and Christians are going to be victorious with him.
Well, exactly. I mean, at first it outlines the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of. We reign with the Lord Jesus here on earth, and then we move on to the new heavens and the new earth, where we finally get rid of all the suffering and the sorrow and the heartache and the illnesses and everything. So we've got some glorified days up ahead of us. Absolutely.
Yeah. Amen.
Hey, it's Chris again. I've asked you this question before, but it has been a very long time ago. And I think because we're talking about Revelation, it's a good time to bring it back for people that might not remember this. I have heard over the course of my life statements from some people that cast doubt on Revelation going, well, he was in isolation when he wrote that, as if it shouldn't be taken for granted or it shouldn't be part of the Bible. Why do you consider Revelation to be important and part of God's Holy Bible?
Well, it's part of the 66 books. John wrote it. He was kind of an outcast on an island somewhere, but my goodness, this is the bookend of the Bible. We've got Genesis and Revelation as the bookends, and look at the significant content. Genesis spells out the absolute beginning. Revelation spells out the absolute end. And why would anybody not want to understand how God's going to wrap things up? There's got to be an explanation. We don't go on forever and ever and ever and ever. Nothing does. But God's got it all outlined in a perfect design for the end of the age, first the end of the church age with the rapture, and then there's some years to follow that, followed by the millennium, but followed by not just heaven on earth, which could be considered the millennium, but eternity with, as I said, without sorrow, without tears, without sickness, with reunions. I think of those that have gone on before me, including my parents. I can't wait to see them again. Well, how many people of other faiths, we won't get into naming the other faiths, but how many have no hope of any kind of eternal perspective? For who knows? I mean, maybe the Hindu is sort of has reincarnation and things like that, but we are going to see our loved ones again. We're going to know them. We're going to be sitting around probably a big table having a coffee and tea, and it's going to be a glorious time. I can't wait.
Yeah.
And we won't have to be on a diet.
Exactly, which I'm on. Yes.
Hey, Jan, what you got coming up on your program this weekend?
I got Alex Newman coming up, and that's because he's going to be our speaker for Understanding the Times Thursday night, April the 11th, and they can consult my website. It's a one-night Understanding the Times conference here in Minneapolis. No cost. You can live stream it. We give you all the instructions at my website. So we hope we'll meet. We hear from tons of your folks, Fred. We really do, and it's a joy to always hear from them. So even better when we can meet them.
Jan, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Your program, Understanding the Times, at 1 o'clock Central on Saturday, noon Central on Sunday. One of the most popular here on American Family Radio. We thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Fred and Chris. Goodbye.
All right. Take care. Take care. And her program is indeed, I've been to a couple of her earlier conferences when she had major national conferences. She had 6,000 people come out for a weekend. One of our listeners, AFR listeners, was doing a tour here in our headquarters the other day, and a young lady, and she says she just takes all in this prophecy right now, because as Christians, we have got to understand God is still in control. That's number one. And that he is not bound by time like we are. God is outside of time. He from the beginning until the end. And why churches would not in this day and age, when there's so much chaos, and we deal with that chaos every day here on American Family Radio, why pastors would not go into the book of Revelation, Daniel, whatever the case may be, and say, hey, there's an end to this.
It would be a perfect thing for if a pastor didn't feel led to do it on a Sunday morning, certainly a smaller, more intimate setting for a Sunday night or a Wednesday night prayer meeting, a Bible study. Open up the book of Revelation. But also, I'll tell you this, for people like myself that read it and like, what in the world is he talking about here?
Yes.
There are a number of pastors that do have books that kind of walk you through it. Dr. David Jeremiah has one, Dr. Robert Jeffress as well. I know for a fact that Alex and Bert do cover Revelation from time to time on Exploring the Word, and our own Ray Pritchard is happy to answer questions on this topic, too, when we are blessed to have him on today's issues.
Yeah, another couple of authors, Dr. Ron Rhodes and also Dr. Mark Hitchcock, have written on this extensively. So I would invite you, if you can find books by these authors. They are great because I think now more than ever, Christians should be studying and reading and find someone who has some knowledge about. There's a lot of imagery that's in the book of Revelation, but it, as Jan says, it tells the end of the story. It talks about the millennial reign of Jesus Christ on this earth after the 7 years of tribulation, and then the new heaven and the new earth. It only gets better.
Yeah.
And so we're just called upon to be what his brother Don said through the years, our founder, we're called upon to be faithful.
Right. Well, some people will say, I just don't have the time. Well, Jesus made time for you when he went to the cross. So
Amen.
spare a few minutes.
Amen.
The amount of time it takes you to stream an episode of something or watch a film, you can knock out some good Bible study.
Amen.
And read one of those other books, too, that help you kind of understand or have a better idea of what exactly is going on there. Because I'm no expert, but I do read it, and I'm like candlesticks and lamps and dragons and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, it is difficult to understand, but it's our job to study Scripture. Scripture actually tells us to study, so we should do that.
And I often, we were talking about that some Christians say, I've never heard a study done on the book of Revelation. It's kind of like getting a John Grisham novel and saying, I'm going to read 2/3 of this, but you know what? I don't care about how the book ends. When's the last time you would hear somebody say that about a novel that they're reading?
Yeah.
No. The 66 books of the Bible are a completion. It is God's gift to us. His word is his gift to us. And I get encouraged when I read the end of the story. It puts everything in perspective. All right, we got a few minutes left.
Yes.
Another story there, Chris?
Well, we from time to time on AFN cover the issue of squatting. And when I say squatting, we're talking about people that show up and just decide to live on a piece of property without paying the owner of that property rent or something in exchange for their being allowed to live there. And this is not just happening in liberal areas, although it does happen there pretty frequently, liberal areas being California, Illinois, New York. But even in red state Texas, we've got an example out of San Antonio, home of the Alamo, victory or death, where I've got a couple of homeowners here, Judith Matthews and Abram Mendez. They were talking to Fox today about squatters taking over their San Antonio home. Clip 7.
We called the police and we didn't get any help from them. Instead, the police told him that he has the right to stay the property, and the police considered him as a resident and didn't give us any help.
We went to the constable's office because our county has a constable. They explained to us the rights to tell to the police that is a trespassing matter. We explained the law, the letter, and how to enforce it, and yet the police did not want to do anything.
To serve and protect.
Oh, this whole story, like you say, of squatting has really come to the forefront. Some of it involves illegals finding a residence somewhere. Remember, there was the video just a few weeks ago of this guy from Venezuela who was in the country, and he was encouraging people to go out and find empty houses and take them over.
Yeah.
Because there are jurisdictions in the country that say the person that's in the house has more rights than the owner of the house.
Right.
And this is this particular case in San Antonio. This young couple, they have this house, they purchase this house, And they have a friend who says, I know someone who can come in and do the renovations that are required before you move in. So they allow this person to go in and to do work, but he moves his partner, wife, whoever it is, in with him. This has been about a month now, and they are refusing to move. They're wrecking the house inside, but they are refusing. And like this dear couple has said, they go to the authorities, and the authorities tell them, well, according to this statute or this bylaw that's in this town, we can't do anything about it. Can you imagine? You own the house. You may be paying the mortgage on it, but the city says we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Now, Florida was in the news a couple of weeks ago because Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill eliminating squatters' rights in the state of Florida. He said, we're not doing this. We're not Illinois. We're not New York. It's not going to happen in Florida. At the time, I called Jenna Ellis because while she works for us and she has a show on AFR.net, shameless plug, she also lives in Florida. And so she was very pleased with her governor. And I remember one of the things that she told me, I don't have this audio, but she told me that, saying squatters' rights is like saying robbers' rights. There is no such thing. And she went on to say that every governor, every red state governor especially, should follow in Ron DeSantis' lead and do away with squatters' rights, even if a city says, well, we're going to do it. This is probably not the last time that we're going to hear of this, but even the Venezuelan that was squatting and encouraging others to do that, he was doing it with TikTok. So there's another reason why some people don't like TikTok and want to do away with it, because people are using it for no good.
Yeah. We only got a couple of minutes left. You got a short story for us?
Speaking of Florida, I want to squeeze in this one last soundbite, time permitting. Attorney General Ashley Moody was on Fox and Friends earlier today, and she was saying that Florida, they don't put up with a lot of the woke stuff here. It's not just Ron DeSantis in the news for saying things like this. It's Attorney General Ashley Moody, and she said, we have the most pro-law enforcement state. Clip 9.
Florida has identified where we have gone the other way from some of these states and cities, and it really boils down to topics that you'll go, oh yeah, that happened here, and it's defunding the police, decriminalizing crime from theft to legalizing drugs, rogue prosecutors, revolving jailhouse door, letting everybody out, no cash bail, holding juveniles accountable, and finally, and you saw the clip from yesterday, supporting vocally, strenuously our law enforcement men and women. And that's why folks are moving here. That's why officers are relocating here. I said yesterday, we have a waiting list on some of our training programs to certify out-of-state officers as Florida heroes. And so what we wanted to show is Florida has figured out the equation here. If you stay clear on these 6 things, we can not only show you're a safer community, a more secure community, but we can show you the real economic impact and stability.
It's almost, she names those 6 things, I think she said. It's just common sense stuff.
Yeah.
And people want to get back to some common sense laws. They want to get back to a city government, a state government that is there to protect them, not to curtail their normal activities. And that's why Florida, Texas, and several other states are seeing such an influx in folks.
So what you're saying is we need to make common sense again.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I'm going to put that on a red cap.
Well, but as Tim Wildman, our president, often says and host of this program, you know what? The other thing that makes you scratch your head, folks in New York keep putting these liberal politicians into power.
Get what you vote for.
Yeah, and you get what you vote for. And hopefully, more and more Americans are waking up, because wokeness is only going to drive a state into the ground. And if you keep allowing these politicians these kinds of policies, they're only going to make your life miserable. And wouldn't it be nice just to change your home turf and instead of having to move somewhere else to get some freedoms back? All right, that's the first hour of today's issues. For today, we're back with more right after the news. Don't go away.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 12037, you help make it possible for us to continue.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. New polling shows troubling data for the Biden campaign. Ryan Schmelz has more.
Former President Trump leads President Biden in all but one battleground state in a new poll by the Wall Street Journal. Those states include Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, and North Carolina, with the two candidates tied in Wisconsin. The results are similar when third-party candidates are involved and in a head-to-head matchup. Those polled say they trust former President Trump more to handle the economy and immigration, while trusting President Biden more on the issue of abortion. A separate poll done by NPR, PBS NewsHour, and Marist College shows President Biden with a slight lead overall if the election were held today. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced a motion to remove House Speaker Mike Johnson as the chamber's leader. South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace voiced her opinion about the motion.
Oh, I don't support the motion to vacate the chair. In fact, the motion that was filed wasn't privileged, and so we're actually not even going to vote on it. And so, Mike Johnson was dealt a bad hand.
President Biden speaks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today for the first time since Monday's deadly IDF Gaza strike that killed 7 aid workers, including a Canadian-American citizen. Meanwhile, fighting continues between Israel and Iran-backed proxies. Trey Yinks has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Israel is bracing for the possibility of an Iranian response following that strike this week that killed 2 top Iranian generals in Syria. The rising tension comes as the Israeli cabinet meets tonight to discuss these threats from Iran, the ongoing war in Gaza, and ceasefire talks. Conversations are ongoing for a ceasefire, but both Israel and Hamas are holding firm on their demands. Israel is under new pressure to define an end to the conflict after striking a convoy of aid workers on Monday, killing 7 people. President Biden is expected to speak over the phone with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They are likely to discuss the strike against that aid convoy and these new threats from Iran.
Students at a Texas high school had a controversial assignment on gender. More from Bronson Woodruff.
The assignment at Santa Fe High School near Houston used an online tool known as the Genderbread Person to get students to learn about and explore the different aspects of gender. Texas Scorecard reports the assignment included describing differences between gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation. The instruction teaches gender identity is, quote, how you in your head think about yourself, end quote, while biological sex refers to the, quote, objectively measurable organs, hormones, and chromosomes, end quote. The diagram also touches on gender expression, which looks at how you dress, behave, and interact to express your gender. One teenager reportedly said the assignment had students write what they identify as and what they're sexually and romantically attracted to. Jonathan Sines is president and an attorney for Texas Values.
The amount of activity that public schools are involved in and spend on political and controversial LGBT topics is off the charts.
He said that's why a lot of parents are looking for other education options. He added he's proud of his student for coming forward and expressing concern.
Because in many public schools these days, there's a lot of fear amongst students that if you express your concern on these issues that you're going to be punished. And there's also an element of secrecy where school administrators are cutting parents out of these equations and these conversations.
I'm Bronson Woodruff.
Americans are preparing for Monday's solar eclipse, as 15 states will be in what is called the path of totality. Jonathan Hunt has a preview.
What's going to happen on Monday is that the moon, as we look at the sun, will begin creeping across the sun's surface until in a certain 100-mile or so corridor, it blocks it out totally. It will look completely amazing. So where and when can you see it? Well, if you want to be in the path of totality, it's going to begin about 2:30 p.m. Eastern down in Texas on the border there, right around Eagle Pass, and then it will curve up across the United States, going through Arkansas, for instance. It'll end up just exiting the United States right around Niagara Falls. 30 million people live in the path of totality.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pete.
Hey man, what are you doing?
I'm just lying here relaxing in a stream. I call it streaming.
Okay, you know that word already has another meaning, right?
AFA Streaming offers free and subscription video content. Titles like By Design, The God Who Speaks, and Asbury Revival, Desperate for More. You'll also find video versions of AFR programs. Visit afa.net and click on Streaming. Today's Issues continues on AFR.
And welcome back to this Thursday edition of Today's Issues. Fred Jackson here, along with Chris Woodward, and joined now by Steve Jordahl.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Steve Paisley Jordahl.
Paisley Jordahl. I'm wearing Paisley today. Tim, I'm wearing it for you, in remembrance of you.
Well, yeah. Just to make it clear.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine.
He's fine. He's on his way to a donor meeting, I guess. But
Yes. Steve and Ed are away today, so we're calling it a news coup.
There you go.
The news crew is here today. So, but Steve, earlier in the program, we were talking about Biden's election problems, and high on everybody's list when you talk about polling is what's going on the southern border. Some would say what's not going on the southern border as far as enforcement. And there's a story this morning. Now, we've heard a little bit about this before. Some are saying there's over 20,000 Chinese nationals now that have come into the country. You may have seen the videos down in San Diego where there's an opening in the fence and they're just pouring in. Some of them have suitcases on rollers.
Yeah.
They don't look like people suffering economically.
I have often taken a look at some of this video that's coming, and if these people are walking up from Guatemala, they look very fit and refreshed for that. That's all I got to say. With regard to the Chinese invasion at the southern border, if that's what you want to call it, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, says this doesn't happen at all without the knowledge and permission of Communist China. Listen to clip one.
Travels here, and if they're from China, they are traveling here, are they not? At the express.
Right.
Yep.
That was Laura Ingraham asking the question.
Here. And if they're from China, they are traveling here, are they not? At the express permission of the Communist Party of China, correct?
Absolutely certain. We know for sure that we don't have any idea who they are. That is, Not only are they mostly gotaways, but even the vetting that we're doing of them is just a handful of simple questions, and then we release them.
Now, in January, a 26-year-old Navy petty officer from California was sentenced to over 2 years in jail for giving sensitive U.S. military information.
All right. So that's all that to say, China is kind of enemy number one right now. They're the ones we're looking at as far as threats to the United States, not only the sovereignty, but our economy, technology. They are, at this point, the leading threat, I guess, to the democracies that we have, our supremacy in the world.
You know, it's absolutely mind-boggling when you stop to think about this. Like Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State in the Trump administration, is saying, there is no way that these people are leaving communist China and coming here without the express permission of the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. When you look at the pictures, a lot of them are very healthy, military-age young men. And so you have to believe that amongst these people, and, you know, there have been arrests of Chinese who have been found guilty of spying for the communist government. And so you have to believe that some of them are here not to start a new life in democracy in the United States and to get a good job. No, they're here on mission.
Yeah.
They're here on mission for Beijing. Pretty scary. And like I said, the videos that we've been seeing, Chris, with this, of these people with roller suitcases, with expensive clothing on. There was a story back a few weeks ago with one of these young men when he came through that little hole in the fence in San Diego, goes and rents an expensive car.
Yeah.
How in the world do you classify him as a migrant looking for a better life?
Right. This is why you can spend just a little bit of time on social media, Facebook especially. I just saw this meme a few days ago. If you're better off today than you were 4 years ago, you're probably an illegal immigrant.
That's not a Babylon Bee
No,
either.
no. I think it was a picture of Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah. Steve?
It's true. All right. Yeah, so I think it's worth mentioning, again, that what we've seen from China. They're the ones that are flying the spy balloons over our country.
Yeah, we don't take them out until they get to fly right across the country.
That's right. We got to let them go all the way across the country. There's a lot of stuff right now going on with Taiwan. There's some elections coming up in Taiwan that people are saying is going to be an inflection point at that country. We are cruising towards, I mean, I know all that the Middle East gets all the press, but we're cruising towards a conflict with China, and that's going to be, that's not going to go well, I don't think, at this point with this administration.
And don't dismiss the fact that China understands that we're under stress. We're supplying so much to the Ukraine right now in finances. We're sending military assets to Israel to help them in their war with terrorism. You've got all of this going on, and don't think that the Chinese understand this and they will not take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Staying overseas for a little bit, if we may, do you know that there's a deal on the table, the potential deal on the table? We're telling the Houthi rebels in Yemen, a terrorist group that we've designated a terrorist group, that we will take that designation off if they just stop attacking ships in the Gulf of Yemen. They're doing this ostensibly in order to draw support away from Israel. But the fact that we are saying we're negotiating now with terrorist groups saying we'll take your designation away if you just stop, doing this one act of terror, it to me is an astounding act. It's a little bit of a foreign policy debacle is what I would think.
Well, it's really interesting. If you go back to the Obama years, when he sent pallets of cash to Iran. Remember that? And I'm not exaggerating here. There's pictures of pallets.
I'll post them.
of cash to Iran to say, okay, this is money that we acquired during sanctions. We're going to give you a chance to make good on this. So we're sending, and I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. Joe Biden gets elected president. Well, let's talk about after Obama, there was Trump. Trump takes out Soleimani and celebrates the fact Soleimani was one of their chief military people, terrorist organizer, et cetera, for Iran. Trump takes him out. Then Joe Biden gets elected president, and what does he do? He starts removing sanctions from Iran. He wants to open up, he says, a new avenue of communication with Iran. So he starts removing these sanctions that Trump had put in place to keep Iran in check, in particular the development of their nuclear weapons. And so now you have this, I could hardly believe this, that the Biden administration, maybe I was naive not to believe it, the Biden administration now suggesting to remove the terrorist designation from these Houthi rebels.
Yeah.
Somebody was telling me, it was John Riley the other day, who's just back from Israel, our own John Riley. He was saying what a lot of people in this country don't understand. In the Middle East mentality, when you express this kind of weakness that the Biden administration is demonstrating, In the Middle East, the mentality is now's the time to attack.
They only know strength. It's a whole different cultural mindset. We think that we can negotiate, we'll be kind, let's reason together about these things. But I tell you, the democracy and a functioning democracy has kind of made us out of touch with not only the rest of the world, but the rest of history.
Yes.
Because all throughout history, the only thing that mattered, the only currency was power.
Yeah.
And they take it at the expense of anybody. These human rights, individual rights.
Yeah.
They know nothing of those things in many other countries.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same Biden administration saying, hey, we'll take away your terrorist designation. It's the same one that was quick to call Iran a few days ago, hey, it wasn't us. They're worried about optics and retaliation and things of that nature. And some might say, well, he's just trying to protect people. He's not showing strength like other presidents, including Democrats, have in times past.
And that's exactly what we need right now is a president who will show strength. But you combine that with what Joe Biden has carried out, this invasion on our southern border. Is there any reason, Steve, why there seems to be, and it's being reflected in the polls, that a lot of people are very concerned not only about Biden's mental state, but they're getting more and more afraid of the safety, of the security of this country?
Yeah. Right now, but Joe Biden is in a tough spot. He's got on his far left, he's got some people screaming at him to cut Israel loose, basically, and then the rest of the country, which actually supports Israel, he's trying to navigate that, but he is not well. He's not his foreign policy. It seems is by fits and starts. Again, like we were saying, it's foreign. It's unknown to any other country. We don't know it. Nobody else conducts foreign policy like this. Mm-hmm. And you got an economy that's in this country that's kind of on edge. Mm-hmm. The polling is not good for Joe Biden, which may be good for Donald Trump, but we're in an inflection point, I think, is the best way I'd like to.
Well, I think there's a lot of anxiety. It was really interesting this morning. There was a piece on Fox, and I think they entitled it Bunkers for Billionaires. And it was all about, apparently, billionaires who are now considering ways to survive. And then there was also a commercial on Fox from a company that's basically offering up packages of rations. And they're packaging food that will last for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So it reminds me of going back to the millennia, the 2000.
Oh, Y2K.
Y2K. Yeah. But this was a commercial on Fox and showed, meals that are packaged in such a way that will, 25 years this food will last in these packages. And I'm thinking, it's kind of interesting. On the same day you have these bunkers for billionaires, and now you have this commercial for packages of food that you can buy to survive. So you've got a nation who's now starting to talk more and more, how can we survive what's going on? Is it any wonder why this administration, Chris, is underwater when it comes to the polls that we're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, the bunker thing makes me think of the stories I've heard. I'm not old enough to remember this, but I've actually been in one in the area where I'm from in Mississippi, but back in the 60s when you had like bomb shelters.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was a place not far from where I'm from. It was a home. It was basically several tubes that were all connected to one another, and it was inside this giant mound of dirt out in the boonies. Spent some time inside that as a teenager, and it was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
There was a movie with Brendan Fraser and Chris. Was the more cowbell guy?
Christopher
Walken, where they thought that there was a nuclear attack on. They went down into their bunker and they sealed it for 25 years because that's how long the
Blast from the Past. That's was the name of the movie.
That's how long the radiation was going to be in the atmosphere. Yeah. It turned out it was like a plane crash nearby, but they ended up being down there for 25 years without knowing that the rest of the world moved on.
Yeah.
The network I used to work for in Canada, on Vancouver Island, they had a whole radio studio complex where This was back, in that time when everybody was afraid that there was going to be nuclear explosions everywhere. And I was taken to this place, and it was really weird because all the furnishings were 60s.
Mm-hmm.
The tile floors and the even in the kitchens that they had set up, because they set it up so that you could last a long time down there. It was kind of spooky.
Let me guess, the refrigerator and stove were either avocado or they were yellow.
Yes, yeah, you're exactly right. And the news studio had 60s vintage equipment. It was really kind of weird, but when you stop to think about it, there was real fear at that time, and that's the kind of thing I'm starting to see now. There's real fear about, okay, what does the future hold if it keeps going this direction? And of course, as Christians, we were just talking to Jan Markell of Understanding the Times. We know God is still in control, and we rest in him. But things are getting pretty chaotic out there.
My consistent discussions with foreign policy people like Bob McGinnis and those kind of people that we interview all the time, the next war with China is not going to be missiles flying over the Pacific.
No,
it's going to be waged on Wall Street. It's going to be waged in our power sources, our computer networks. They can bring us to our knees, like you say. If everybody's hiding in a bunker, there's no command and control anymore. They don't have to fire a shot, and we're out of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as I say, God is still in control, and we don't doubt that for a second. And I'll tell you what. If you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior right now, you have a right to be very, very concerned.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, now's the time to get right.
Amen. No time like today.
Yeah.
Hey, either one of you guys planning on taking a vacation this summer? Maybe driving anywhere?
Yeah. Planning it.
Well, you might want to keep an eye out, because we're finding out today that the Biden administration has decided not to buy back several 3 million barrels of oil that it had borrowed from the strategic reserves.
Try about, I think, 300 billion.
300. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 300 billion.
A lot. It took out 50 million barrels from the reserves in 2021. It wanted to stabilize gas prices.
Yes.
For the 2022 midterms.
Yeah.
For political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what that's for.
Mm-hmm.
But now the price of gas is too high. They can't afford to put it back.
Yeah.
And so without that, you could be looking at some rising gas prices over the summer.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it locally, Chris. You may have noticed this, too. It's gone up about 25 cents a gallon. I was in Florida a few days ago, and I think regular down there was about $3.15 a gallon. I saw a Fox reporter outside a gas station in, was it Connecticut the other day? And the readings were like regular gasoline was $4.50 a gallon.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get up to premium, it was over $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I thought, my. I mean, to fill up a car, we're now talking about $100.
Yeah, and bear in mind too, you motorists are not just suffering under the high-priced gas that you're putting inside your personal vehicle. We're all paying for diesel, because if you're buying something from a store, that good got to that store thanks to diesel.
Mm-hmm.
Diesel is back over $4 a gallon, and the big concern here is we're not even in the summer months yet when gas traditionally does go up. So it is not out of the question that we're going to see $5 diesel averages in the not-too-distant future, and regular being back above $4.
But guys, don't worry, electric cars. That's the answer.
Well,
wait a minute.
Has that imploded or what?
Where does the electricity come from, Joe? Who was it that was it the energy secretary that made that big boo-boo?
Oh, that went. She was trying to travel across the country.
Yes. The electric cars broke down.
Yeah. So she was concerned that they were going to break down. So she had somebody from the Department of Energy go in a gas-powered, taxpayer-funded vehicle to sit in front of a charger to save the spot for her once she arrived for the photo op. And a lady with a baby who was concerned because it was very hot outside, she couldn't charge her car. She called the cops. It was on NPR. Whoever wrote that from NPR, your last day at work was awesome.
What a disaster. I tell you what, you just look at this, and if if it wasn't public policy being put forward by this administration, the President of the United States, it would be laughable. But folks, this is what elections are all about.
It's starting to implode, though. There's a car company called Fisker, Fisker, that is exclusively electric vehicles, and they see the handwriting on the wall. They are trying to dump stock, get rid of their cars. They have slashed prices. Sunday, buy an electric car. They're about 30% off right now, just in order to just get rid of things. It's a boondoggle. There's a good word for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not against electric cars per se. If I was in the market for something to tootle back and forth between work and home and to go get the groceries in town. But when you're talking about what Joe Biden is talking about, that, you're going to be pretty well forced to buy electric cars, what are you going to do about these cross-country travels? Mm-hmm. I think the American people, it's just one of those ingredients that's going into the minds of the American people right now. This is not the road that we want to go down as a country.
Well, and to Steve's point, too, it's not just Fisker. Last month, Quartz had an article out, and this was their headline, Tesla might actually lose money this year.
Yeah.
So it's not just the companies that you might not have heard of that aren't as big, even Tesla.
If Elon's losing money, things are bad.
You got problems.
He's pretty much guaranteed to make money with whatever he does.
Yes.
Hey, can we have a moment of silence for Juan Vicente Perez Mora, a Venezuelan man who died at the age of 114. He was the world's oldest human.
Wow.
It's a record that he had actually held for a couple of years, which, that's a record that you would think would turn over quite frequently. But he was just about a month shy of his 115th birthday. The oldest man, this is the oldest man title according to Guinness, the Book of World Records, goes to 112-year-old Yasuburo Sonobe of Japan. He's 112.
Yeah, I love these stories because you want to study to see, what was the diet. Mm-hmm. I remember George Beverly Shea, singer for Billy Graham. Yeah. He talked about he reached 100.
He did.
And he's gone home, of course, to be with the Lord many years ago. But he was asked about what do you credit for your longevity? Of course, number one was his relationship with Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. Number two, he found a good wife.
Yeah.
You know what number three was?
What's that?
Coffee.
Coffee, huh?
That's
we're going to live forever.
They asked Mr. Mora what his secret was.
Okay.
He said he attributed his longevity to working hard, resting on holidays, going to bed early, drinking a glass of agua ardiente, which is a locally distilled liquor every day, one glass of liquor a day.
Which we don't recommend, folks.
No, he was pickled, I guess. Loving God and always carrying him around in his heart is what he said.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. No, it goes back, I know 114, 115 kind of pales to what we read in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Some of these.
Guinness wasn't around back in the days of...
No, and
Noah.
I that's one of the questions I like to ask when I get to heaven is, okay, how did your body last 700 years?
Charlie Butts retired almost 10 years ago and still works 75 hours a week.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want that. That's
and he drinks coffee, so,
it's true.
There may be something to that.
The oldest living person in the world, by the way, is Maria Barrientos Moreno, who's 117. The women tend to live longer than the men, so she is the oldest living person. And according to the Guinness Book World of Records, the oldest person ever was held by Janine Louis Calment, who lived 122 years and 164 days.
Yeah.
There was a time where you might live that long and you didn't see a lot of advancements in technology. But let's say you're born in 1875 and you live to be 100 some odd years old. You saw a lot. You saw flight.
Yes.
You saw man land on the moon. You saw a lot of stuff. But, from Abram to Isaac, not a lot going on there.
Got a new plow.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, folks, it's been good to be with you today. I must remind you that Tim and Ed and JJ will be here for Trivia Friday tomorrow. reporting to you live from their retreat there. You can look forward to that. But it's been good to be with you guys today. Chris Woodward, Steve Jordahl, Matt in the chair there taking care of us. And as always, we have to go away right now to make room for more great programming here on American Family Radio. Do stay tuned. And remember, may you be blessed today, but also be a blessing to someone else. We'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood,